We have an initial country presentation by Jeffrey. Jeff, maybe he's online. Maybe you want to wave your hand and just say hello to folks. And then we'll have a range of panelists that are joining with Jeffrey to answer a few more questions and provide additional contextual information from the country perspective. We have Kachulu from Timor-Leste. Kachulu, are you online with us?
Hi, Bob. Can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you.
Yeah,
Great.
I am here. Thank you.
It's very good to see you. Welcome.
Thanks.
And
It's
we
nice to
have
join you.
Dion. Yes. Why don't you come join me on the front of the, well, back of the room, front of the room, depending on your perspective. But on this big table here, it's a lonely place. So please come and join me. And then finally, we have Ms. Sharufa coming from Maldives. Are you with us?
Hi, yes, I'm here. Good morning, everybody.
Great, great, thank you. So while I wait for Dihan to join me from Sri Lanka, yes, I didn't mention that, but I just thought it was a given at this point. Jeffrey, why don't I hand over to you for your opening presentation, and then we'll walk through some additional questions to our panelists. Over to you, Jeffrey.
All right. Do you want me to share the screen from here, or Sarina will put it up on that side?
Where are we sharing screen from, here or there? We'll share it from here. Thank you.
Okay. All right, thanks everyone for the opportunity. It's a little bit last minute sort of process, but yes, so my team at SAP consists of myself on fisheries and aquaculture. Hemant, who already you heard just before, is the agricultural portfolio manager. And then we have Shija Jacob, who looks after livestock and One Health aspects. And then we have another lady, Rana Asgar, who is away on leave at the moment, also looking after some One Health aspects. So, yep, next slide. So in the Pacific, this is going to be a regional presentation because it's too difficult in the time frame that was provided to do individual country things, and because the Pacific is mainly small island developing states, we've just done an overall presentation for the Pacific, but noting that FAO has 14 members within the Pacific Islands region. And in that, of course, we've heard the discussions about the strategic framework, where the PPAs are coming from. And also in the Pacific, the big guiding policy document is from the Pacific Islands Forum Secretariat. And this is this 250 strategy for the Blue Pacific continent, which has a range of aspects that follow for developing the Pacific overall, but has a strong component on enhancing better production and increasing agri-foods production in the Pacific. All right, next slide. So there was a series of questions that Bo sent around, and we've gone through this process a little bit with the development of the technical paper for the SID Solutions Forum. So, essentially, what is better production? And I think this is applicable to all member countries of FAO, and even those that are still territories or colonies. It is about increasing sustainable production of stable agri-foods. People have to eat. And of course, in that association is the need for improving livelihoods, including diversification. We have increasing populations that need to be We have issues with governance and corruption in many countries. We have poor service delivery. We have a wide range of factors that impact on people producing enough food, including the tyranny of distances, the large food imports, and inadequate policy environments, a whole range of things. Anyway, so gaps and trends, again, poor productivity and low economies of scale, high food imports, and then of course, then the pressure on the health systems with increased NCDs, poor policy environments, limited financial institutions that can support small scale producers, but also large scale producers. Because when we talk about better production, I think there is this blinkered sort of view that it has to be really about a village level person or a smallholder production person, but there is a role for private sector to increase access to food. Issues with access to land and sea, which is a big issue because of the strong tenureship arrangements that present in all Pacific Island countries. And of course, a poorly developed and supported private sector. And then, of course, this creates issues with the challenges, low productivity. We have issues with poor quality. So, you know, the biggest issues for many producers and people that want to export or to provide food at a wider area is consistency of quality and consistency of supply. Then there's aging population, and for some countries in the Pacific, they have high migration. So a lot of people are moving offshore to developed countries like Australia, New Zealand, and to the US. And this is causing a labor shortage and things, and it doesn't help with these governments, particularly Australia and New Zealand, offering rural worker schemes, so taking out you know, productive population, say from 20 to 40 years old, and going to work on farms in Australia and New Zealand rather than working on farms in their own home countries. Of course, low research and extension capacity, which we'll talk about a bit afterwards. Transboundary pests and plants and diseases. So yes, One Health, biosecurity is a big issue. Poor transport infrastructure, which I mentioned before, limits market access. High costs of livestock feed, and that's also for fish as well. So limited aquaculture production. And then, of course, limited veterinarian services to mitigate some of these transboundary pests. Next slide. So government priorities, if you looked at that, you know, every country has its own development strategies and different policy frameworks, and Hammond mentioned a little bit, and one of the other previous speakers mentioned the issues of the siloization or sectorization that we still face, and that's also still a big problem with government as well. You know, the the whole of government approach is often thrown around, but the reality is that we all still work in our sectors, we all still work in our portfolios, and so there is issues with that, and that's, I think we've heard a little bit about that with the PPAs as well this morning. So government priorities, of course, boosting local production, enabling environment, the promotion of local and traditional nutritious foods in the face of cheaper imports, and, you know, of course, this desire for modernity, which often translates to then having consuming Western goods and foods, nutrition education and healthy consumption, and then, of course, the issues that we're facing now at an accelerated rate is the impacts of climate change, which is going to reduce productivity, and we have to come up with innovative solutions to mitigate that, to help with the increasing populations that we're also facing. So government requests that we've had through SAP, of course, the invasive pests, plants and diseases, disease surveillance, of course, increasing livestock production. In most countries, there is limited production outside of the household for most animal protein, soil improvement and water conservation, livestock feed, including fish. This is a big issue for aquaculture, and the Pacific is at the lowest end of aquaculture production for a huge number of reasons. Increasing productive land access, new technologies and tools and training, which we'll also talk a little bit about later, policy reviews and development, and of course, implementation. We have governments that have poor or limited capacity. And this also then doesn't translate to active support. And we'll talk about how do we deal with that as well. Youth employment creation, because we need to keep people at home, and the production of agri-foods is an occupation, but why there seems to be a huge dissatisfaction with that. And of course, then improving production and value addition. And then we've heard of OCOP and Hi as examples of that as FAO initiatives. Next slide. So SAP has done its CPF, which involves significant communication with countries, and I guess in a way a wish list that comes out from those countries and then has to be synthesized and aligned. This year, SAP has changed its TCP funding policy from its previous process. So now only $300,000 is available per country, but across all sectors. So personally, I think that has some impacts on how SAP can deliver, but that's the decision that's been made. We have some large funding projects, which we've just heard from Hammond, who's responsible for this EU STOTUS project. Of course, there's OCOP. There is GCF and GEF opportunities. But one thing in the Pacific is that FAO doesn't seem to be in a position to be competitive against other UN agencies, most notably UNDP, IUCN, and other NGOs like WWF. So there is a need for greater resource mobilization for Pacific to, because it is one of the most vulnerable places in the world. Okay, next slide. Okay, examples of requests and crossovers and stuff like that. Recently, we're dealing with this big coconut rhinoceros beetle pandemic, I would call it, because it's in most countries. So HQ has helped out with that. There is a close working collaboration on global actions for fall armyworm and OCOP. There is contact with HQ more and RAP on various proposals with a component for Pacific SIDS. And I'll talk about that a bit more later. Working closely with IPPC and PPPO on global soil partnerships, et cetera, stuff like that. So agribusiness incubation centers, that's, you know, crossing over from production to better livelihoods. And of course, we've heard differences about how do we align PPAs when they have specific titles, but then underneath they have things, because yes, even blue transformation fits in with number 1 and number 5 and number 4, and also this issue. So it's commonly said that, you know, digital innovation links with better life and better nutrition. And in SAP, that is where most of the DVI interventions sit, is in with better nutrition. Okay, next slide. So examples of country level things, activities at the moment, particularly in this area of gender and youth inclusion, GESI, the agribusiness incubators that are being established now in Fiji, Samoa, and Solomons will largely target youth and women engagement. I think there would be similar examples of that in Sri Lanka and other countries there. And of course, the previous fish fat project that was funded by the Japanese government had a very, very strong component on post-harvest processing and value adding, which was targeted at women and youth. Okay, next slide. What should RAP and HQ do more to support country level work? I think we'll hear a lot more about this in the things, but of course, we always talk about the issues that we face with FAO's policies and procedures and stuff like that, which often causes undue delays. And unfortunately, that's in a system that we're all inherited and we all live with. And so unless there is a dramatic change, we will still have to facilitate that the best way we can. I think just as a sort of a tongue-in-cheek thing, greater equity in meeting and workshop timing, particularly with HQ due to time differences and because SAP doesn't have the economy of scale of staff. It's usually SAP that has to surrender its thing to participate in events like this. And one of the issues too that I think is more important is the support for resource mobilization and technical support. So what we often find is that RAP or HQ will develop projects because they have an opportunity, but they will have a specific component, but then there is not very much involvement with SAP except for basically notification and some sort of, I don't know, tokenism is maybe not a right word, but a level of just facilitation through being informed and stuff like that. And I think that's the end of the presentation. Yeah. So I apologize if that's a little bit maybe rudimentary or something like that, but yes, it was short notice, so we've put this together. If people do want better, more in-depth information on better production in the Pacific, I have modified our technical paper, which I can distribute to people if they want to see about levels, because I noticed from some of the other presentations yesterday, they had figures of production and stuff like that. So those things are there as well. So over to you now, Bob, for the next section. So do I just continue?
Well, there's a hand up and there's we can pause just for a moment and then we'll go into the other presentations or the other speakers. I did want to just say one thing. First of all, great appreciation for putting this together and presenting to all of us. Your document on additional figures and production would be very welcome. So please share. And just as a foundation, ADG has often mentioned that when we're looking at better production, as sort of a baseline, if we don't understand this data across the board, like what are targets that our countries are aiming for, or if we're not understanding a bit the production gap, it's harder to formulate strong policies or strategies for better production. So it's really quite useful to have that data. And as we've discussed, the production isn't just about more volume. So within that, we have to consider, nuanced strategies in supporting countries reach their production objectives as well. So thank you very much. Having a hard time reading it. My eyes are Ms. Jacob Shija.
The livestock
Jacob,
officer.
over to you. Yes, over to you for a comment.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks, Jeff. And thank you, Bob and team, for organizing this wonderful 3-day sessions. It's really needed for the better coordination. And I just wanted to also thank HQ and RAP, especially with the livestock sector. SAP has received so much of support from like even resource mobilization wise, as well as from technical assistance, because like even my position is very new, like I started 1 year ago. So we have received so much of support. So a big thank you for all the teams in HQ as well as RAP. And we will continue to collaborate. But I just thought to just add, besides the recruitment issues, which Jeff suggested, I also noticed that it would be wonderful if we get, like our SAP management, get some advice on how to retain staff. So the staff that we have, I've noticed like there's huge turnover, like even in our office itself. Just to give you kind of a background, like for us, we, in the past 1 year or so, like we had 3 or 4 communication specialists in our team. Like, they come, they go, they come and go. So something need to kind of, some systems in place so then we can retain our staff, because communication specialists are very key. Like many of the livestock publications that we have developed for our Pacific Island countries for their needs, it's still in PWS, even though they are technically cleared. So some advice on those mechanisms where we can retain our staff. And it's not just limited to communications, like even others, like, we only have 2 HR people supporting our whole 14 countries recruitment. And again, procurement, we just have 2 colleagues. So yeah, over to you. Thank you. And that was just my comment. And thanks again, for this wonderful sessions. Thanks.
Thank you, Sija. Your concern is well noted in rethinking how we manage staff retention, et cetera, staff empowerment. I'm not sure that we have the right people in the room for engaging in that discussion, but we'll put that in our quote unquote parking lot and make sure that we continue to address this issue. People are welcome to address this in comments if they want as we move forward. Are there any additional thoughts, reflections for Jeffrey before we move on? Please.
Okay, thank you. So I noticed that there are kind of difference between the government priority and government requests. So how we can, let's say FAO could kind of make a response to that kind of things. And then from the, this is second, from the government requests, how many activities that FAO could give the support, could provide support to the, government? So it means that maybe we are still minimal because sometimes a lot of other UN agency and also international agency play the roles in a country. So FAO is only one of, among maybe 50 agency in a country. So we have to compete, and also we have to prioritize our intervention that could make a kind of significant impact to the country. This is my, reflection from the presentation.
But thank you. It sounds like you asked a question and you've answered it yourself. So that's the best kind of intervention. But to our other speakers, I'm going to move on to. So thank you very much. I'm going to move on to other speakers. So starting with Kachulu, I wanted to see if you wanted to respond to any of the points that have been raised so far. But if you had some additionality that you'd like to share with us in terms of what you see as your experience in Timor-Leste. And also this last question of how we deliver at scale, how do we arrange our different priorities in a seascape of different agencies and competitors?
Right.
So a challenging question to you, but over to you, Kachulu. I'll give you about 4 minutes, please.
Wow, thank you so much, Bob. So I also joined colleagues before appreciating this initiative, though we kind of missed it. Just informed a few minutes ago that there's this very critical meeting ongoing, so I'm happy to attend. I would like to agree also with Jeff, the observations he has made. But to be very brief, for Timor-Leste, the Director General visited recently, and also the Secretary General of United Nations. The government made it very clear that the topmost priority for the next 5 years would be food security and nutrition. And also with discussions with Minister of Agriculture, they have tried to explain what this means. For instance, now the self-food sufficiency, talking the staple food rice, is about 38%, 40%, which means they have a deficit of 60% above, and they have to meet that by importation. So the minister has reached out to FAO that they would like technical expertise on how to increase rice production. Of course, with other crops being included, diversity, but that's the emphasis. The issue is that they want to do this mostly from increasing the land and the rice production. So we have about 30,000 hectares now. They want to push it to 50,000 hectares or so. But that would not meet the food self-sufficiency that they seek. They're targeting to move from 38 to about 70%. So what would be another solution is to increase the productivity. I think that's another part that if we would be better placed to assist. The challenge is they really want to maintain this organic rice production. So the chance to improve productivity is a little bit low, but perhaps there could be some convincing, because even the 60% of the rice that they're importing now is inorganic. Yeah, so why produce organic country and import inorganic? But those are the things that FAO has to assist with. And already we're doing a rice assessment to find out the barriers to increasing investments in Timor-Leste, issues to do with irrigation management, building back the Water Users Association, etc. And we're happy that RAP is already supporting us in this. Point two was livestock and dairy production. So it's also a country that imports a lot of livestock products, but then they have huge numbers of buffaloes, which the minister says they could be put into better use if we increase productivity, so that they could have buffalo meat and milk as well. So this would be another area that FAO should assist with. Let me talk about climate resilience. So this was also presented to the Director General by the President and the Ambassador for Climate Change. The issues mostly have to do with the degradation of natural resources, particularly catchment areas, and then the decreased water resource availability for Timor-Leste. We are doing a lot of activities in this area on climate smart agriculture. Issues to do with water access to agriculture, even though the government has also emphasized to us that they would like a lot of support on forestry, on coffee production, and including the MRV systems. So again, I'm happy to state that RAP is already providing this kind of support to try to come up with programs so that we could assist with the government. I wanted to say something also a previous participants has already said about these priority areas. So even though it does not really belong to production, the issue is about food safety. You know, it's a country that imports a lot of food from outside the country, but they do not have the mechanisms to do the testing, quality control, and inspection. And the president highlighted this, that he requires FAO support, building the capacities in country to be able to test food. Perhaps the starting issue would be the legal framework itself is not there. So there's no law on food standards in Timor-Leste. I think this would be an entry point for FAO. Of course, there have been already other studies done understanding the institutional capacities, etc., that we can build upon. So would really like to request for this support from RAP in the areas of food safety and food quality. Last point, if I still have the 5 minutes, I don't. The issue to do with youth employment in agriculture as an issue of increasing production. So Jeff said there is an aging population in this part of the world, but for Timor-Leste is a very, very young population. So we are talking about over 65%, you know, below 30 years old. And then there is really huge unemployment about the youth, and the government is struggling with this, with lots of youth, of course, going for seasonal labor. We have tried on pilot basis the green jobs, but I think it's time that we come up with a broader program where we could incentivize the youth and maybe having the project of takers, the private sector, so that the youth can have attractive enterprises in the agriculture sector. I would think that maybe I stop here for the time, and I'm also happy to provide the details. We had a short notice, but happy to attend and to. Thank you, Bob.
Thank you, Kachula. I think it's really, really useful and very targeted information. These are the sorts of things where FAO has substantive programs, but are we targeting them to help you make an impact on the ground? And I think this is the question of how we arrange ourselves. And I've always had a perspective that as FAO evolves, it's not necessarily the what we do that's changing, it's how we do it and how we bring things to scale. I think this is a perfect example of how we need to dig into that and unpack it. You've highlighted very important areas of food and nutrition security, particularly the rice production issue. And I understood that came through as one of the top priorities from the DG's mission. You'd mentioned the climate resilience and how these mechanisms can be implemented, especially in a very closed climactic context as Timor-Leste. And then on food safety, ironically, our food safety and policy expert left the room just before you mentioned that, but we'll brief him on this. And then the really important sort of accelerator area of youth employment and agriculture. As we move forward, I want people to reflect on these demands that come to us. Are they addressing root causes of food and nutrition security indeficiencies or insecurities? This was mentioned at the very beginning of our discussions of, are we addressing the root causes when we put together programs? And a lot of these issues need to be unpacked substantively before we can put in strategies that will really address these root causes. I'm going to ask that we take another 8 minutes or so. We'll take another 8 minutes or so, 10 minutes, because I took so much time in our sort of warm up and recap. But we'll try to catch up as we go before coffee tea break. I'm going to ask one more speaker to go first, and then we're going to open the floor. And Yurdi will have first chance at opening the floor. His hand was up. So feel free to call me on this. But I wanted to go. So thank you, Kachula, for really concise and useful reflections. I want to go over to Ms. Sharufa very quickly for some reflections from Maldives. And I just wanted to ask you if there's additionality or some additional perspective that you'd like to share as a fairly different country context, but we'd like to hear from you. So let's give you, again, 3-4 minutes to provide us with some additionality that you note from the Maldives. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. So really, I mean, listening to Jeff's presentation and especially the parts on the gaps and trends and challenges, it was just like listening to a presentation on specifically on Maldives, because we do face the same challenges, low productivity, no economies of scale. As you would know, Maldives is a country made up of very small islands, and we have limited arable land. We do not do a lot of agriculture in the country. 90% of our food is imported. So it is within this context that FAO is working in Maldives, and going into some of the government priorities at the moment, food security, since the COVID pandemic, actually, food security has become like a #1 priority for the country. And the government is focusing on large scale agriculture at the moment, larger scale agriculture relatively compared to what we have been doing. So the government is trying to establish certain agricultural economic zones where they would focus on producing and gaining some sort of self-sufficiency, or at least some level of import reduction in certain selected crops that they've been that are produced in the Maldives. So this is where the government is working on. And then from the FAO side, they've requested in addition to this geographical constraints, we also have the climate and severe weather patterns related difficulties. So particularly challenging for the Maldives, because we have very our land is very low lying. on average 1 meter above sea level. So this including all the kind of wind and rain damage, we also have saltwater intrusion, which is a big factor that is hindering our agricultural production. So one of the areas that we've received FAO's request for FAO's support is in introducing climate smart agricultural methods, new ways of doing things. Like it's not necessarily new, but it's not been done in large scale in Maldives before, such as even greenhouse technology. It's quite new for the Maldives. So there is request to support the country in these kind of innovations. And then there's also request from FAO to support the smallholder farmers. And then another challenge for the country is also the lack of data. So there's been requests to support the country in gathering, enhancing the agricultural statistics and gathering real-time data on this. Huge challenge is on the capacity of the government, and both at the central and local levels, because this is a very geographically dispersed country. So there is a huge requirement to do capacity building for the government. Unfortunately, because of the way the country is spread out, this also becomes a very costly activity, because traveling between islands is also quite costly. So this is the kind of requests that we have received from the government, and FAO is supporting on. Right now, we have a couple of TCPs ongoing supporting these areas, and we have we have received JEF funding under the Special Climate Change Fund, where we are supporting, we will be supporting innovative and climate smart agriculture in the Maldives. In terms of what other support does the country need from HQ and REP, I think I can echo a lot of things that Jeff and Kachulu has mentioned, but and I think Dihan would be also presenting the Sri Lanka case. Maldives and Sri Lanka, we share the same country office, so our requests are quite similar there. But one thing I wanted to really highlight is the need for greater resource mobilization. Maldives is classified as an upper middle income country, which means that our areas where we can get support are very limited now. So however, there is quite a need for the country, especially because everything is imported into the country, and doing a project in Maldives is double the cost of, I would assume, some of the other countries. So there is greater need for resource mobilization for the country, for which I think if we can get the narrative going, this would be a very useful support from HQ and rep side. That's all from me. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. It's really a useful additional complementarity information. So thanks for your thoughts. Based on time, I'm just going to give Dihan the floor for a couple of minutes, and then we'll take one or two questions and try to move on to our next session. Unfortunately, we're constrained with time, but Dihan, over to you.
Yes, thank you, Bob. Adding on to Shurufa, in the interest of time, I'll just very briefly summarize into a few minutes how, because Maldives and Sri Lanka share the same representation, and we basically have almost the same requirements. So how Sri Lanka is working towards achieving better production is, the presentation will have all the details which will be shared later on, but increase in input use efficiency, sustainable use of renewable energy, and water resources management, and efficient mechanization practices. Moving on to what the government of Sri Lanka wants achieved is basically we've categorized into three aspects: bridging the yield gap. Second one would be increasing cultivated land extent, and third being the value addition and marketing. And finally, the government's request from FAO is once again we've categorized into four, starting from introduction of novel technologies, moving on to promote digitalization and enhance real-time agricultural statistics, and finally the support to value addition and branding, etc. Thank you, Bob. That's basically very.
That's the ultimate in thin slicing and providing a quick summary of this, but I think it's super clear and brought into just a handful of components. These are all very useful for us to hear and to bring forward. In the idea of time, I'll open the floor for a couple of comments, starting with Yurdi, and then if there's one or two comments, then we'll move on to our next panel.
Yeah, thank you very much, Bob. And I would like to thank all the presenters of this morning session from SAP, from Timor-Leste, from Maldives and Sri Lanka. I just would like to really take this, take note on the mission of DG to Timor-Leste, okay? I think there have been a mention about support for rice sufficiency in Timor-Leste. We really need to work across offices to follow up on this. Beside that, the government also requested FAO to support on coffee value chain. As you know, coffee is the single most important export products of Timor-Leste. And specific request to support coffee value chain is also to link, Timor-Leste with other coffee producing countries, in particular Brazil. There was also a request on livestock, as already mentioned, but in particular to buffalo development or breed improvement. I think these are three things that I took note, and it was reflected on DG back to office report that we really have to, together, and it's not only for team in Timor-Leste, but team in RAP, and in particular because it relates to NSP and also NSA. Let's work together on this because, we will be asked, as you know, Bob, progress regularly on this. Just to add this, Bob, I think it's a good opportunity to share, as I was also part of that mission with the DG. Thank you very much.
I think that's, high priority. And you're right, we will be asked to follow up within a month or so on this specifically. Thanks for that reminder and push. There was David and then Taka, please.
Thank you very much for these presentations. These were great. I think from the blue transformation perspective as well, both SAP region and Maldives are very good examples, if you like, of the performance of the sector for fisheries, certainly for high seas fisheries. In SAP region, the combined efforts of regional partners have really boosted the income for individual countries in terms of the allocation of resources and licensing. So some countries are making between 50 and 70% of their GDP from the income from the fisheries licenses. So this is in the background to this, and it would be nice maybe to try to to highlight some of these linkages for the blue transformation. It's also in SAP, there's a very good arrangements in terms of management and allocation of resources to address climate change impacts and changes as these happen. Maldives also is in a very similar situation with very strong production from the ocean fishery and a big contribution to the to the national GDP. Maldives also has a very good case study, if you like, on the pole and line tuna from Maldives. So there's a very good branding and marketing effort of these in terms of a good example of a value chain, if you like, that really functions very well. Now we do support through regional projects, through regional fisheries bodies, and also through global efforts as well. But just like to highlight these as well. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Much appreciated. It's good to have positive examples that we can build on and learn from. Taka, over to you.
Thank you. When we talk about the sort of, for example, blue transformation, the Indonesia has very good aquaculture system, and they also really developed in a couple of the things. China also really good in the aquaculture. And even India is looking at the possibility to get some technical assistance from the other country like China or the Indonesia. On the buffalo side, because of the so many reasons, India has a lot of good example in the raising the buffalo. So when we look at the development of those lower middle countries and that sort of the things, I think instead of the RAP as a hub, RAP has a hub, but the RAP can facilitate South-South cooperation between those developed countries and lower developed countries. So in a way that the India would be very useful to transfer a lot of knowledge. And China also, we have a big players in this region, and they are capable. Thailand has very good in the chicken farming, aquaculture, so many other stuff. So instead of we try do ourselves within the RAP, but also probably we should, it's a times to revisit the capacity of the country so that the technical transfer will be made by those countries through South-South cooperation. That's came to my mind. That's one. The second one is when we talk about, this is the better production discussion. But when we talk about the better production, value chain have to be always discussed. But where is in the value chain in the PPA? I still sometimes puzzled. Where is it? But you see, if it is very important, it should be really linked in the value chain in the BP1. And this sort of the logic is missing. And I'm sorry that I come back to the Timor-Leste and buffalo and the coffee. Vietnam created a huge, coffee industry. And the Timor-Leste can learn a lot from the Vietnam. So I think that integration of the sort of the network among the country through the South-South cooperation would be very, very interesting to pursue in this region. And then lack of the discussion of the value chain is sort of the key in the BP1. Thanks.
Thank you, Taka. Maybe one last comment, and then we're going to have to move on. No? Otherwise, you're going to miss your coffee tea break, which I'm sure you're more dedicated to the discussions, but I want to make sure you have some stand-up time and get the blood flowing.
Yeah, no, I just want to echo what Takash mentioned. Vietnam is one of the top producers of rice and coffee and other commodities. When it comes to rice, yes, mentioned by a sub colleague, 60% of the rice has to be imported from other countries, and they want to boost this rice production. But from this experience of Vietnam, Vietnam is very keen to provide the South-South cooperation support to Timor-Leste after the recent high-level meeting between the two head of states. But I would like to also emphasize the need of infrastructure, because you cannot introduce the BP practices for rice production without proper investments in irrigation system. So Vietnam has brought out and benefited a lot from the World Bank and ADB. What I mean is we need to work with IFIs and talk with the government to borrow the money from those financial institutions so that in tandem with the technical packages offered by FAO, the infrastructure is in a more complete form to facilitate the rice industry. Over.
Great, thank you. Much appreciated. And Taka, thanks for your thoughts. It was, as you were mentioning that, I was thinking exactly the same thing, that building regional networks of South-South triangular cooperation, but not necessarily calling it that formally, but having these different platforms that are countries involved in doing their sharing could be a really advantageous opportunity for us. Big takeaway from this is that the different issues are quite complex. And that we need to unpack them in order to address the core drivers of the challenge that are posed as obstacles to making changes. That we have to bring a programmatic approach to this, and it's not just one PPA by PPA that are being addressed, but we have to look at the interlinkages of the connectivity of the range of partners that we have, their skills and resources, and the different challenges that are faced at all levels from production all the way through for the value chains. What this really requires us at country level is to be more sort of development brokers. And I've seen this sort of evolution taking place for the last 5 years within FAO. And I know it's difficult because we're not all trained as sort of development brokers in piecing together all the pieces of the puzzle. But this is something, a skill that we're continuing to develop and that we should continue to seek at country level of how we develop our networks and bring the range of stakeholders together, the types of platforms that we lead, how these can be used as drivers of change and strategic approaches. A few reflections on the main points that have been brought out here today. I want to thank all of our speakers for the really, really useful introductions to the context at country level.